Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whichever applies to you. I am Moss, and welcome to my channel. And as we all sit here and freeze in the ninth circle of hell, buried up to our waists in fiendish ice, I was scrolling through Twitter just yesterday, and for those of you who are members of Twitter and know all about it, you know that if you're on a scavenger hunt for dimwits and retards, that's the best place to go look. So without further ado, I'm just going to jump right into it because this is a fucking gem that I found. Now, I will put a disclaimer on here. This channel was not supposed to be a Tolkien devotee channel. It just so happens to be that Tolkien and his writings and everything basically that applies to him are the things that I'm most passionate about, whether positively or negatively. So we'll just jump right on into it. Now, as you can see, we have Gabriella Cesares Kelly. I don't know if I pronounced that. I probably butchered that name, but you can see here in her bio, second thing, pronouns. So tell me you didn't see that coming. Pima County Recorder, Arizona, elected official, Xenial, voting, culture, 21st century, native things, and dismantling white supremacy. So you already know, without even looking at any of the rest of this thread, you already know exactly what this is talking about as it regards to Tolkien. Well, sort of. There's a couple of lanes that people tend to divulge down when they're talking about how problematic The Lord of the Rings and other writings of Tolkien are. But this is basically par for the course if we're talking about somebody complaining about either Tolkien's books or his movies. Now, we'll just go through, and I'm going to read the full thread that she put up. I'm going to pick it apart piece by piece. So, tweet number 1. Rewatched the Loader trilogy recently with my kid. I already fucked up. Rewatched the Loader trilogy recently, and my kid casually says, "This is the only scene where two women speak to each other in the whole trilogy. The exchange? A little girl says to Eowyn, 'Where's Mama?' Eowyn shushes her. Shh. End scene. Ouch. It also never occurred to me like that." Arwen wasn't a part of the Council of Elrond, even though she literally tracked Strider's group down and outrode 8 Nazgul riders to save Frodo. And I noticed in this rewatch that Legolas arrived in Rivendell, can't even get that right, real fan, with other elven women. They also weren't invited to the Council of Elrond. Of course, that all-male council meeting is where the Fellowship is formed. They send out for representatives from all over Middle-earth. Galadriel is a ring-bearer. Didn't include her. The misogyny extends even to the Ents. Treebeard casually mentions that all the Ent wives were lost and he doesn't remember what they actually look like. Bruh. And yes, I still love the trilogy, but some things are hard to unsee. This thread is cracking me up. I'm an elected official that oversees voter registration and early voting in Arizona. Gee, really? Really? Things are going real well for you down there, aren't they, Miss Kelly? I post a lot about the voting process, 21st century native things. I'm not going to try to pronounce that. And pop culture, mostly sci-fi fantasy. It's hilarious that this post is what goes viral. P.S. My kid is 21. We were literally watching the shh scene, and I was surprised, though. Guess shouldn't have been. Okay? That phonetically doesn't make sense. Kid says there's a million memes about it. Yes, now remember the girl talking to her mom about the horse as she sends her kids to Rohan to raise the alarm. I still love Loader. No, you don't. You don't. Because you see it as problematic. And that's the same way with all of the other people who follow these same lines of thought. And this thread is full of those people. In fact, you know what? I'm going to hold off on picking this apart real quick. There was one that I wanted to show you. A real fucking gem that I found down here. Where is it? Where is it? I think I already passed it. Ah, here it is. Dragon something. He, him. Big surprise. I mean, I just feel like if women had been involved, there wouldn't have been a trilogy. They would have fixed the problem in a weekend, and that would have been that. You think it would have taken them 100 hours to figure out speak, friend, and enter? I think not. Go fuck yourself, dude. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. And you know what? I hope whoever's pants you're trying to get into sees this tweet, because you're a real ally. So, I'm going to break this down, and I know that this has been done ad nauseum. People have talked about this over and over and over, but I'm going to come at this from two different levels. So, first of all, from a fiscal perspective. Now, we know that the debate has been going on for, say, for instance, sports. People have been bitching, especially the American women's soccer team has been bitching for years about not being paid equal, and the argument has been presented that they don't offer a valuable enough product to be warranted the amount of money that they are asking for. And I've got the receipts. So you can see here in the United States, level of consumption of men and women's sport among respondents in selected countries worldwide as of June 2021. United States, third down on the list. United Kingdom and Canada, more progressive than the United States, is even worse about this. But 66% of those surveyed say, I consume more men's sports. 19% say, I consume both men and women's sports equally. 11% say, I consume more women's sports. And 3% say, don't know. Whereas up here in the United Kingdom, overwhelmingly 78% of people say that they watch more men's sports. So that just tells you the monetary value of what men and women have to offer in those realms. But let's take a look at something a little bit more, relative to films. Now, I did find this cool little study here talking about box office revenues and things like that for films with male leads and female leads. Now, I'm not going to go over and read the whole thing. I just want to go over a few key points as they relate to blockbuster movies and their leads. So, as we can see here, on average, blockbuster movies with male lead actors generate $79.8 million in revenue. The distribution, even when log scaled, is skewed right, with the median being much lower at $49.8 million. However, if we look at it a little bit further, on average, blockbuster movies with female lead actors generate $65.6 million in revenue. So as we can see, it's probably about about $14.2 million. So as we can see here, male lead blockbusters generate on average $14.2 million more in the box office. But not only that, the author of this article does go on to say that male leads are typically reviewed better. So, I'll scroll down to here. Distribution of Rotten Tomato scores of blockbusters with male leads. Mean from Rotten Tomatoes is 49.6 and 48 even, respectively. So 49.6 for male, 48 for female. Metacritic scores of blockbusters with male lead. Mean 51.8. Mean 50.8, a whole percentage point above female leads are male leads. Now, as we can see, a lot of these have general median peaks for the females higher than male. However, that's just the general concentration of films, or percentage of films in that rating bracket. Now we can see here it has this high peak here and then drops precipitously, whereas male leads will peak a little bit lower and then drop a lot more gradually. You can see especially here in the about 70 to 90 range. There's a big dip there in the female range, and it's pretty gradual there in the male range. So it's more reliable from a fiscal standpoint to cast a male lead in an action movie or blockbuster than it is a female. And I think that says a lot about the general attitude of not just men, but everybody as to who should be portraying these roles. Now, unless it's just a completely outlandish movie, say like Kill Bill or something along those lines, it's generally going to be more profitable to cast a male lead. And I think a lot of that has to do with the attitudes that people are generally more predisposed to. Now, a lot of people would say that, and especially in women, a lot of people would say that, oh, you have, what's the term? What is it? Intrinsic misogyny or something like that. I can't remember exactly what kind of term they apply to it. But I mean, there are legitimate biological and inherent reasons why we view each other this way. And this is where I'm going to get into the weeds. So we have this study from Science Daily. Men and women may respond differently to danger from November 30th, 2009. Now, obviously, this is an older study, but we don't have anything, so far as I'm aware of, that duplicates the data, or at least tries to test it again to give us any different results. Researchers using functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, to study brain activation have found that men and women respond differently to positive and negative stimuli, according to a study presented today at the annual meeting of the Radiological Society of North America. Obviously, again, this is 2009, so it wasn't today. For the study, Dr. Urbanek and colleagues recruited 40 right-handed volunteers, 21 men and 19 women between the ages of 18 and 36. The volunteers underwent fMRI while viewing pictures from the International Effective Picture System, a widely used standardized testing system comprised of several thousand slides of various objects and images from ordinary life designed to evoke defined emotional states. The images were displayed in 2 runs. For the first run, only negative pictures were shown. For the second run, only positive pictures were shown. While viewing the negative images, women showed decidedly stronger and more extensive activation in the left thalamus, which relays sensory information to and from the cerebral cortex, including pain and pleasure centers. Men exhibited more activation in the left insula, which gauges the physiological state of the entire body and then generates subjective feelings that can bring about actions. Information from the insula is relayed to other brain structures involved in decision making. So basically what this is getting at is, with negative pictures, women basically focus that all on their pleasure centers and all on their pain and pleasure centers, invoking emotional states. Men tend to send those signals to a more rational place, the insula, as it's called, involved in decision making. The brain activation seen in women might indicate stronger involvement in the neural circuit, which is associated with identification of emotional stimuli, Dr. Urbanek said. The more pronounced activation of the insular cortex in men might be related to the autonomic components, such as elevated heart rate or increased sweating that accompany watching emotional material. The autonomic nervous system controls involuntary functions, including respiration, heart rate, and digestion, and helps to adjust certain functions in response to stress or other environmental stimuli. It is responsible for the body's fight or flight response to threatening situations. He continues, in men, the negative images on the slides were more potent in driving their autonomic system, Dr. Urbanek said. This might signal that when confronted with dangerous situations, men are more likely than women to take action. So what does that say? I mean, it basically just reinforces the fact that men and women are different in their responses to dangerous situations. I mean, basically just what this article has been talking about since I've been stumbling through it. But this is also something that people a long time ago intrinsically just knew. It was the nature of people. It was how people worked, and they knew it. They didn't need studies to tell them this. Nowadays, people seem to forget this, or they just casually ignore it. So it's up to people like me to bring this back to their attention. And I'm not saying I'm the smartest guy in the tool shed, because that's how that saying goes. But basically what I'm getting at is that I at least have enough objectivity to notice these differences. And that whenever these arguments are brought up, at least we have these studies to put the people who are projecting forth these arguments saying that men and women are the same, women don't have the same opportunities as men because men get all these action roles in films, they get paid more in sports, they get paid more to do all these physical and dangerous things. Of fucking course they do. Of course they do. And we'll bring that back all the way back to Tolkien. Now, like I said before, everybody back then knew that men and women were inherently different. Now, I know there's a whole other question of rights and stuff and what rights men had and women didn't have and vice versa. But the fact of the matter is that only men were required for selective service. And that's still the case, believe it or not, here in the United States. How many women did you see a couple years ago saying that they did not want women to be required to join, required for selective service? A fuckload of them, which would otherwise have considered themselves progressive. Equality, my ass. Now, I'm not saying that I want selective service, but that's neither here nor there. Basically, what I'm getting at is that Tolkien saw these differences. He lived through World War I. He fought in the trenches at the Battle of the Somme, and, you know, there's a bunch of stuff that he did. He watched all of his buddies die, and it was all men. It was all his brothers. And men were people of action. Women were people of nurturing. That's why in Tolkien's writings, men are typically, I say typically, the ones who carry out most of the actions. Women, say, for instance, Galadriel. I'll use Galadriel as an example of a nurturer. Galadriel wore Ninya, the ring of adamant. It was one of the 3 elven rings. She wore that, and it allowed her to have the power to preserve the forest, specifically this forest of Lorien. Now, that is just inherent in what the worldview was between men and women back in those days. Now that the lines have been blurred between what the physical capabilities are of either sex, there really is no consistency. And yet, even still, as I said before, you're going to have all of these movies that are going to try to put female-fronted blockbusters. You're going to have all of these female-fronted blockbusters that are going to try to make $1 billion, and they're just not. And that is, as I said before, simply because it doesn't feel natural. Men say it, women say it. If you sit back and you ask yourself, my house is on fire. Oh no, my house is on fire. I hope somebody comes in and saves me. Close your eyes for a second and picture who is busting down your door and dragging your sorry ass out of your burning house. I don't even have to say it. You already know. You know. And I'm not even going to get into the physical fitness standards that have been dropping precipitously over the course of the last several years in the U.S. military, thanks to efforts to equally represent both men and women and whatever else wants to join. So that's really all I wanted to say about this whole situation. Oh, no, it's not. And then the one thing that really got me is that this one right here, where it says misogyny extends even to the Ents. Treebeard casually mentions that all the Ent wives were lost and he doesn't remember what they actually look like. Bruh. Tell me that you don't know anything about Tolkien's work without actually saying it. Okay? This is just ignorance of what you're actually talking about. What, you think that the Ent wives, you think that Treebeard doesn't remember what women look like, what Ent wives look like, rather, because he's a misogynist? What? Do you understand? Do you understand how stupid that sounds? Let me give you a little bit of a lesson in lore here. I've got the Entwives pulled up on Tolkien Gateway. Great resource for anything Tolkien that you want to look at. During the First or the Second Age, they started to move further away from the male Ents because they like to plant and control small things like vegetables, grass, and flowers, while the male Ents tended to larger trees of the great forest. The Entwives passed eastward over the Anduin and went to the region that would later become the Brownlands. After Morgoth was overthrown, their gardens blossomed, and they taught agriculture to the primitive men, and they honored them. When Sauron burned that region and stopped the advance of the last alliance down the Anduin, the Entwives were likely wiped out, although some might have been captured and enslaved as agricultural workers. That's just speculation. My point is, what this is talking about, when Sauron stops the advance of the last alliance in the Brownlands, and the events of the Two Towers, which Gabriella is referencing, take place 3,000 years apart. Tell me that you wouldn't forget something over the course of 3,000 years. Incredible. Incredible. Now, there is another one that I came across. Tolkien was racist and misogynistic, and it is reflected in his writings. I've read and enjoyed them, but his bigotry still stands. I'd love to see a reimagining of the stories from a non-white straight male lens. Obviously, I replied, congratulations, you got Rings of Power. Now leave it alone. Now, honestly, I am tempted to go ahead and just make another one about Tolkien with, in the argument of him being racist and why that's just fucking false as well. But I'm going to leave this one here. If you stuck with me through this rant, I really appreciate it. You all have a good day. Go pick up something heavy. Peace.